Next is chords. Now, part of this to understand is the reason also I'm focusing on these 4 parts is because these 4 parts will actually fill it'll fill a good solid ground on how a track will move eventually through time. Meaning that when you have your drums, that's your core rhythm line, or your core pulse in the beats of the music. Your drums is in. Once the bass is in, you can already establish a groove with how the drums and the bass are working together, and also, how they're feeling, right? So those are the first 2. If you're going to work with the bottom-up approach, I like to target those because they work together. Bass and drums, when it comes to the groove, you can do so much with the bass and the drums just by changing time sequencing and totally changing where certain notes will sit on the grid. Okay, so yeah, so right off the bat, we can establish pulse, we can establish beat, and we can establish groove just by targeting drums and bass right off the bat. Third, now, depending on your, it doesn't have to be chords this order, but I just went to the chords next. And when I say chords, I know sometimes you're thinking triads, maybe 4-note chords and stuff like that, which is cool. But if you're not so versed in understanding like chordal theory, the basic idea is this. If you at least understand and get familiar with working with a scale, and I'm talking working with, take just a 7-note heptatonic scale, and then we learn to work with it diatonically, only using the notes within that scale. We want to take that scale and learn to progress note by note. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll do what's called the 1-note move, meaning, and let me show you an example of this. Let me turn, now this plugin, what I did was, or not plugin, this, it's a sound, it's Ableton's, I guess, what did he use? Okay, so yeah, so this is the actual device. It does suck up a little bit of processing. Okay, so it's like a pad, I guess. And now when you're adding progression, I'm using the key. So I'm in the key of D minor in this example that I'm using. So all I'm doing here with the chords is, if, like I said, if you can't play big chords, at least try and find the progression, feel the root. So if your bass line, and here's an important factor too, when you're looking at the bass line, when you start introducing tonality to your music and movement, if this bass was totally static, I mean, in this case, I can get away with G because G gets triggered off a lot, but at some point the next line I'm playing with this pattern is F. So these are possible options I have when I'm writing my chords or my pads. So what I can do is think about that. So if I go to my bass, so yeah, so you can see it's on G, and then here it's on F. So I'm going to think about these 2 to move, because that's how it moves. It moves just before the end of the bar there. It goes G, down F, G, F. So I'm thinking about that before I start implementing my writing. And the reason I'm doing this is because this is where harmony starts to really set in. I'm not going to dive into like advanced theory and understanding of, at least a basic understanding of intervals will give you a good grasp of harmonic layers. But here I'm just doing simple single notes. But the more layers we add, we have to be aware of the chords we're using and the types of intervals that are being portrayed through that passing of time. So if I'm going to start matching my chords on top of my bass, I have to be aware of this. And in composition, when you study composition, these are things we have to be aware of when you're starting to layer your chords on top of your bass, or your melody on top of your chords, or as long as once we start focusing on these 3 factors, bass, chords, and melody, if we start losing track of how things are kind of moving, I mean, you can still experiment and be free and have fun doing it and try stuff, but also be aware and pay attention. If you're hearing things that are not feeling right, it's probably because there's something going on in the harmony that's tripping off certain intervals or something that doesn't feel or sound right for that moment of time. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to be aware of too as I'm doing this. So this is like I said, I'm trying to think more as a compositional approach, not just laying down an idea. Yeah, we are going to lay down ideas. We want to lay down ideas, but I want to make sure they all work well together. And part of that is using your key. So let's try an example. So if I know I'm starting on G, okay, I can So I can just rock with G and F and it'll work. So that's all I'm doing. So let me just show you. I'm going to create a blank clip. Okay. So here I'm using a single note move. Okay. So I'm using G2. Right. And what this does, it just gives me a feeling for how the root notes are moving against the song. Okay. Okay, so that's just G and F. Now I can add a little bit more. I can add like more on the top. I'll see what key I can add. Maybe, okay, not liking A. Okay. Whoa. Okay, so I'll do G and F. Okay, and then once I do my auditioning, just hit record. So now what happens here is, and the reason I'm doing this one note move is because when I mentioned this as the chords, what I'm really referring to is we want to find the movement in how the song progresses with tonality. Okay, and how we get that is usually root tone gives us a sense of tonality. So if now that I have G and F and they're rocking back and forth, what I want to do now is, again, I'm just going to Control A. I'm setting 1/16. Now I can do a bigger quantized value because you can see the note lengths are pretty long, so I can do almost like a bar and it'll still be tight. But I'm using 1/16, but I know it's only quantizing the front of my notes. So just quickly shifts it over. Control L is my loop, and then so there's, and then what I'll do is right here, I want to make sure I capture a perfect loop. So I can see that 2, so this is a 2-bar rocking move. So 2 to 4, 4 to 6. So these are pretty much all I really need is 4 bars. So if I switch my bar length to 4, I should be good. So there we go. So now I have a 4-bar pattern. These notes, these are just single notes that I use that are acting as root tones, and they're just helping me establish movement in the music, how the song will possibly shift from tonal keys or the root tone as it progresses through time. Because when you play chords too, you're always going to have your roots. If you're playing majors, triads, major chords, minors, you'll have always the root note, and that's really, it's root movement that creates a sense of progression and a feeling that the song is changing in different tones as you're going through your chords. So that's what I do. I like to kind of get a basic idea. And what I did up top, let me just show you, is I'm going to show you this melody line because I actually did play some chords. I added to these chords. Now this line I just did here was just an example, but it's not the actual same line as up here. But what I did was, just because it was chewing up some of my processing here, was I actually recorded it into here. I have a track, a group track set up MIDI to audio, and all I do is, if I want to save some processing power, what I do is I take the track and I recorded this actual idea into here, and you can see I had it set up so it's picking up my chords on with an Ableton, and I re-recorded that. So I'm going to stop this guy. Okay, and this is the line that I used, which is this one up top here. But it's playing over here just because, for the sake of processing power, it's going to save some processing power. So let's take a look. And so now we have drums. Okay, we have our bass in, and now we have our chords. All right. And this is how they all sound together. Now this one I held it for 4 bars. the original bass line I had was the one up top. I can switch. Okay, but I like the bottom one. I like this one. This is kind of nice groove. Okay, so that's my drums, that's my bass, and then here's my chords. And like I said, this is an audio track version of my MIDI chords. Just because when I started adding a couple more voices, it was taking up some juice there. So the final one that I didn't really do any writing to, is just I left it open because melody, I like to really play with melody. I like to be very like expressive sometimes, or I just like to just try different many lines. So I always like to write my melody once I have like drums, my bass, and my chords in last. That's not always the case. Sometimes I may write it first, but here in this case, I just left it open just to show you guys live that, you know, we'll come up with something on the track. Now, again, what I want to keep in my mind, and this is, again, like I said, you want to think about this as how is everything going to be sitting tightly? How is it all going to connect? Is I'm focusing on these chords, because this track here, or these three clips that are actually playing right now, and this chord track is relative to these right here. So these, I just want to see the notes that I'm using. So I'm using G, D. So I could possibly get away with like a G major. You know, it's not fully sketched there yet, but I'm using a few voices, 2 G's and a D. So actually, let's take a look. That's probably no. Yeah, so I could probably get away with like a G major on that one. I just have to add the E. But then I also want to see the movement. It shifts down to, it goes from G to F. So you can see in the chord, tonality-wise, here's my root notes, G and F. So this is going to give me a sense of movement. Now here's a thing to keep in mind. This is not always the case, but once you introduce, if your song is a very static, meaning you're being very root tonality, you're using very drone notes, you're not moving around a lot, you can get away by really adding on top of a drone with the scale that you're using. But the minute you start introducing progression in your chords, and the song starts to add a sense of feel and movement, the ear wants to gravitate to the harmony with the other layers coming on top of this progression. So I try to keep that in mind, because that sometimes will affect how the song is feeling and progressing through time. So as it's playing, so I'm thinking about G and F, okay? And when I'm writing my melody, when I'm going to go to write this melody, I'm also going to, okay, so this is just, I hope this doesn't, okay. So yeah, so I just got like this kind of, I'm not even sure what it is. It might be like, let's see what it is here. It's all from Ableton, so it's just, that's the name of the patch. Can't even read that. Does a lot or something? Yeah, does a lot. I guess it does a lot. But yeah, so but that's what I picked for my melody. And so now that I want to write a melody, just gonna, like I said, I'm just gonna let this run through for a bit, and then I'm just gonna kind of just audition my scale. So I'm using my scale. Again, D minor, and I'm going to touch the keys at first just to feel it out, and then see what I can come up with, and then I'll see if I can come up with a rhythm and start adding a little bit of a pattern on top of this. See, if I go too crazy, it's gonna... Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to, I'm not sure if this would, let's see if that'll help. Yeah, so I'm just going to freeze these 2 tracks, just to give myself some juice. Now, I'm not in the main studio here, so it would... okay, so that should help. Freeze that one, and... or it could be the zoom, okay. So yeah, so now melody, let's track this melody in. So normally when I write, I like to audition my idea first before I do anything. That's just me. And once I have the idea and I play through it a few times, I like to sink myself into the groove and into the rhythm, because what that's going to do is, again, I'm thinking of saving myself a lot of time moving forward. I don't want to be sitting here editing my melodies. If I write something down and I got a cool idea, I'm like, oh, that sounds nice. Now, if you have a tough time doing editing, just let it run. Record, let it run, and just lay down a bunch of ideas, get them down. But if you're also comfortable in auditioning, which I'm comfortable in, like I like to, randomly play and audition the ideas, then I'll go and jump in and just audition quickly, and then I'm like, okay, I got it in my mind, go back, then I start tracking it. If you're not comfortable, just hit record and just lay it down so you don't lose any of your ideas. Okay, and that's relative to, like I said, you can do it on any DAW. I know Ableton has a feature where even if I'm not recording, you can call up what you did. It memorizes kind of what your last few riffs that you were playing, so it'll pull those up for you. But like I said, that's usually my approach. So now if I'm ready to write, I can literally pick any of these slots, just hit record and just try it out. So there's a good stretch. So again, I'm working the key of D. The rhythms that you decide to use, it'll also eventually be relative to the style of music you're working. This seems to me more like a chill kind of sounding vibe to these tones. But like I said, I'm just laying the idea down, because these can all change. I can throw on plugins later if I want to put on plugins. But again, the way I wrote this melody, I didn't go do some super crazy patterns here. I try to write as tight to the grid as possible. Again, I'm selecting 1/16. I didn't go any higher much than 16th note values. And when I make the move, or when I make the edit, so select them all, and when I do my quantize, which is Control U on my shortcut, it shouldn't even slightly move. It's like it should be as tight to the grid as possible. Then just audition and listen to how it sounds. I hit one of these notes there. Okay, so I'm going to start from, I'm going to bring it over to the beginning of 3, because that's where the line really kind of starts. This is like some pretty much dead air in the beginning. Okay, and then normally when I write long lines, okay, if you're writing long melody lines, I mean, this is not crazy long. I mean, it's a fair size. Anything more than, 8, 16 bars can be a pretty long line. But what I like to do is start with maybe 8 bars and see where it goes from there, and then maybe I'll switch my bar length to 16, see if I like how they work together. So I have 2 blocks of 8, which give me a 16 bar stretch, and then I can move into my next, my next statement or phrase in the song. So let's see what it sounds like in an 8 bar. Okay, so maybe I'm going to use 16. And there. So I'll use 16. So let's okay, maybe I'll go back to the 8. Wasn't digging that 16. Okay. So, and this is literally how I would write my lines. I would just lay different ideas down, and the same principle goes with my melody writing. Usually your melody and your chords, your melody and your bass, these tend to be the lines I find that I start to really get a little bit of a stretch on possible different ideas of my writing. Now, I'm not going to dive in and go through all different types of melodies I could write right now, but this would eventually start to populate with different ideas. So you may get one for pre-chorus, one for verse. Now, they may not all be playing at the same time in the verse, but that's the idea, is you want to be able to stretch and get your writing. Now, once you're at a point you've got like these 4 basic parts, we can still start adding more to this. So, which for time constraints, I don't want to dive so much into it, but just give you one final quick example is you can start going and just seeing how things will work. And the cool feature I like about working in Ableton is I can run my, I'm just going to mute the melody for a sec so we can hear what's going on. Yeah, just so we can hear the groove. So let's just say you want to add more to the groove. So what you can do is, what I did earlier was I was just experimenting. I didn't bring them in, but I was experimenting here in Ableton, and all I did was I typed in BPM. And what this will do is it'll bring anything that has a sequence or a loop tied to it. So I pulled up BPM, and here under my samples, I just can kind of start going through. If I start playing Ableton, I can now go through and see how these sound, and then I can preview them on top of my clips or my track. That's a little heavy there. Go to like some drums, and let's try maybe let's try see what they have for samples. Okay, so now, and normally you can do like here's some tops, so you can get all kinds of like, this is just like pretty much my sound packs and stuff that, let's see, let's go down to the top ends. Yeah, so let's do that. So you can start seeing how different, you can get different grooves, different rhythms. So now it's starting to fill up a little bit. So you can already hear it's covering a little bit more, right? So if I like that, as an example, I'll take this one, lay it in, and there's the just an example. And you can start from here. You can just slowly start adding and progressing. And when I do this, I cover the areas. So I'm thinking about, am I covering my drums? You know, am I covering my bottom end? Am I adding more fillers on my drums, or am I adding more to my chords, my melody, my bass? So you can just start extending that way. Okay, and that's pretty much, like I said, how I would go about, you know, writing an idea and putting this all together.
Awesome, wicked, bro. Thanks for showing us the layout there and how you approach that part writing exercise. Is there anybody that has any questions at all? I know we went through the parts sequentially, but does anybody have any questions on anything they've seen, or maybe they just have a question in general that they want to ask regarding?
Yeah, I actually do have a question. So in regards to the hi-hat placements and velocities,
yeah,
I noticed that you were putting them on like the offbeats.
The hats?
Yeah, sorry, the shakers.
Oh, the shaker, like the maracas, right?
Yeah, because usually when I produce, I'm not really producing much in the techno area, but a lot of like that being that technical with hi-hats, right? So for me, I really find that interesting. So I noticed with the first clip you did a little bit of velocity editing, but then, and I found that because you did that, it had a little more distinction because you kept the consistent like 100% velocity with the shakers a little bit later on in that loop.
Yeah.
Do you tend to like minimize it, or do you try to do a lot of velocity editing create those loops.
What I do is normally to get the effect of a real drummer playing, like if that's what you're trying to get, I like to just slowly go in and program relative to the song if I'm writing. Like if I was doing something like, you know, trap or, you know, dubstep or, you know, even breaks, you can go as far as breaking down this into like triplets if you wanted to, or even 30-second notes. In this case, if I'm doing 16s, especially if it's like a simple ride on like, you know, a dance floor rhythm, just to give some more motion. Here, it was just me trying to get some more motion on the top end of my my drums, just to make it feel like it's swaying and it's swinging, kind of, right? So I naturally like to have a specific. The ones I like to keep high are the ones that are initiating the dynamic attack, so it feels like there's a downbeat somewhere.
Okay.
And that's how the ear is going to distinguish between the groove of that actual line itself, because the ones that have the strongest velocity are the ones that come out the most relative to the others, and those are the ones that stand out. So you get that sense of groove based on, you know, those ones that are popping out. But you can break this down into like, I mean, this was just like a simple 16th note, but you can break it down into like I said, whatever you're writing. Into 30 seconds, and even hip hop, they use a lot of it too, right?
They do, yeah. So that's why I was the question, because I do a lot of it for when I'm doing like triplets and stuff like that to kind of give it a little more rhythm. Yeah,
and that's good. I mean, if you're triplets, if it calls for triplets, you know, the more the merrier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's answers my question.
Awesome, great. Yeah, Rob, how did you find any questions at all? Or...
I thought it was great. I'm a player, so I play my parts in. I don't use piano roll. So for me, it was very informative because I am actually I do mostly electronic music right now, so everything is piano roll. But I'm a player, so I've played my synths forever. Hence, I tend to play my parts in.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing you got much more finite control of your groove when you work in a piano roll versus playing it in. One of the values or things I like about playing it in, you mentioned it, editing. I don't edit. I play it again.
Yeah.
So that it's closer to that quantize that I know I'm gonna use. Because I get frustrated trying to move notes around in the piano room, but I completely understand the value because I'm a Logic guy. Ableton is all piano scroll, really. Everything happens in that window. I'm a Logic guy. I work in the arrange window, and like I said, I play stuff. But learning it's getting little things out of videos like this that even at my age, I love it because one little thing I didn't know can be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. It could be that linchpin that makes the difference that you didn't think about from a different perspective.
Yeah, I like what you did with your kick drum about changing the velocities.
Yes.
To get a little bit more of that groove happening. I'm into dark techno right now, and that's just straight quarter or 4/4 kick drum for the most part.
Yeah.
A lot of work on making that reverb sound happen after the kick, but this is I like the way you got the groove going.
Cool.
I do.
Awesome. Well, thanks to everyone that joined the chat.
Fantastic job.
And
thank you.
We'll be continuing to do this, and I'll be sending alerts on us doing this at least every other week.
Well, to plant a seed, Jim, sorry, you mentioned it. Maybe we should think of a 1-hour competition.
Yeah. We should definitely talk about that offline, you and I, and see how we could arrange that, because that would make a lot of, and I'm going to connect you and Dave for sure on a separate chat. I know you talked about you're prepping some tracks, and
yeah, for sure.
And Dave's definitely in that dark tech scene in that area where we've had a lot of success. So I think between the two of you guys can come up with a way to get some of your music out as soon as possible. All right.
Amazing.
Cool. All right, man. Thanks for everything. Yeah. Have a great evening. And I said, I'm going to send PDFs to everybody of this breakdown. and you're going to get a copy of the video, which will be up on the TPG YouTube and musicboxx page after.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sticking around.
All right.
No worries.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Enjoy the weekend.
You too.
All right,
Bye.
guys. Have a good weekend.